The Valley of Wheat was one of the most famous bases on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft, but almost 5 years ago it was griefed so severely that it became unrecognizable, a wasteland of craters and cobblestone. Every attempt to rebuild it in the past has failed, and trust me, there's been a lot of them. I've even said before, there's no way the Valley of Wheat could ever be rebuilt. The amount of work needed to be done would be astronomical, and that's ignoring sabotage attempts by griefers. So who would be crazy enough to attempt to restore this wasteland to its former glory? Well, it turns out, the Russians. 5 groups of Russian players have come together in secret to restore 2b2t's most iconic base. They are the first people that have managed to do so successfully. They've done what the community once considered impossible. So how did they manage to pull it off? What challenges did they face in this monumental task? Is the valley actually rebuilt, or is it different from the original? Today we'll be discussing the Valley of Wheat Reconstruction project and how the Russian players joined forces to do what no one else was capable of doing. Given the Valley's reputation as being one of the most griefed bases in 2b2t history, I'm shocked I'm able to make this video today. It was no easy task to keep the Valley of Wheat secure, but if you want to make your life online easy and secure, you should try Dashlane. Dashlane gives you everything to easily manage your passwords and keep them secure. With Dashlane, logging into a website is as easy as clicking login and letting autofill do the rest. It works with addresses and credit cards to make your online shopping seamless and easy. Dashlane works on multiple devices, so if you need to log into an account on your phone, tablet, or desktop, you'll always have access to your passwords and account info. On top of all that, Dashlane also has a VPN, which stops your ISP from tracking your web activity and allows you to watch shows and movies that are unavailable in your country. If you find this as helpful as I do, you can try Dashlane for free on your first device at dashlane.com/FitMC. And if you decide to upgrade to premium, you can use my code FitMC for 10% off. Now then, let's get started. So how did the Valley Reconstruction project start in the first place? Well, my Russian isn't exactly the best, but thanks to some translation help, I was able to piece together the reason why these groups came together. It all began a few months ago. There were 5 different groups of Russian players on 2b2t. Nubakal, the Nitrous Mafia, the Golden Dawn, the Fish Club, and the Zip Club. The relationships between these groups were not exactly the friendliest. They would fight each other from time to time, would get into arguments, and had nothing bringing them together other than their country of origin. It was around this time that a Russian YouTuber named Buldzhat would take an interest in the Valley of Wheat and its history. If you haven't seen my previous videos on the Valley, I'll give you a 20-second summary. The Valley was built 10 years ago by a player named Jang. It provided food for newcomers to the server. Its location was easy to find since it was directly on the Eastern Highway leading away from spawn. But in 2016, during the server's first YouTube invasion, it was griefed so badly that it could not be rebuilt. So that should give you an idea. Buldzhat was very aware of the Valley's griefed reputation and wondered if rebuilding it would even be possible. The 2b2t community has always considered Reconstruction a pointless endeavor because the Valley has been stuck in a vicious cycle of rebuild attempts followed by intense griefing. Most of the time on anarchy servers, once a base is griefed and the original owners leave, there's no real reason for the griefers to return, especially if the base is already a crater. But the Valley is a very unique situation. Due to its close proximity to spawn and its famous reputation, it's had more rebuilding attempts than any other base on the server, and they would always end up the exact same way. Someone would announce publicly that they were restoring the Valley. A little bit of progress would be made, and then griefers would show up and destroy everything. As this cycle would go on over the years, the griefing became worse and worse. From 2016 to 2020, you can actually see the progression of it go from destroyed but recognizable to nuclear wasteland filled with cobblestone monsters, large amounts of withers, and massive craters, with almost none of the original blocks surviving. This vicious cycle is why the Valley had the reputation of being unrepairable. One day on his travels, Buldzhat actually met some English-speaking players at the ruins of the valley. It turned out that a group named the Luminous Sandclave had already started repairing it, but had recently gone inactive. Their progress had not been griefed yet, so it would be easy for someone else to continue. Buldzhat knew if a full reconstruction project was going to work, it had to be done in secret, with a large amount of players working together, and they would have to work fast to prevent it from being discovered by travelers on the highway. He made it his mission to unite the 5 Russian groups together so that they could do the impossible: restore the Valley of Wheat. Due to his status as a YouTuber, he was able to get negotiations started between the groups, and anyone that was unwilling to cooperate on this new secret project was promptly removed. The first few days of the reconstruction project were rough, with some hostilities still being present. Anyone that was caught stealing, griefing, or killing other members were kicked out. But once everyone was on the same page, progress could really start coming along. It was decided early on that they would not be creating an exact replica of the original valley, but rather a newer version of it with some design changes, allowing for more creative freedom. All members were given specific tasks such as removing lava casts, planting new crops, negotiating with other players for obsidian, and constructing the actual buildings. Unlike the original Valley of Wheat, which had no real grief protection, many of the new buildings would have obsidian frames, which would make them more resistant to TNT and other forms of griefing. Even the farmland would have obsidian underneath to reinforce it, and to prevent giant holes from being made into the caverns below. Different block choices such as quartz were used for different pyramids, giving it a slightly different feel from the original. The Russian 2b2t player base had never come together like this before, and they all quickly realized that it was the largest collaborative Russian project in the server's history. They knew they had to commemorate it with a unique build that would act as a symbol of their unification, something that had not been present at the original valley. It was decided that a large obsidian pyramid would be constructed and then covered with sand to make it thematically consistent with the rest of the base. A massive lava cast had to be removed with TNT just to make room for it. Almost all of their remaining obsidian went into the pyramid, and the Russians continued working around the clock for hours and hours. Once all obsidian was in place and the sand was added on top, it blended in perfectly with the rest of the valley. They formally connected it with the Eastern Highway and repaired many of the other roadways. The reconstruction was still secret enough that there were no major griefing attempts on it, but the Russians knew that once they finished the project and announced it, griefers would come swarming in, and the valley's famous cycle of destruction would continue. So they enjoyed the restored oasis while they could. For the first time in almost 5 years, it was starting to look like it once did back in the old days. There were still sections that contained large lava casts, but removing them wouldn't really matter, as griefers would just replace them anyway. By the end of April, as they ran out of obsidian, they felt they had rebuilt enough of the valley to finally go public, and on May 1st, 2021, they announced their reconstruction project to the entire community. They welcomed everyone to come see the valley and decide for themselves whether they would continue the restoration or destroy it. They left it up to the greater community. Now, considering this is an anarchy server, I think you know what happened next. Griefers made a mad dash to the valley to begin destroying it. After a few hours, it had taken considerable damage, but thanks to smart planning, the obsidian frames helped much of the base to survive the initial griefing attempts. But in the days after, as news of the reconstruction became more widespread, the griefing continued. The Luminous Sandclave, the English-speaking group that had originally started repairing the valley before going inactive, became upset that the Russians had finished their work and vowed to destroy the pyramid. But thanks to some quick negotiating, the Russians convinced them to stop, and a truce was agreed upon. It has now been almost 2 weeks since the reconstruction project went public. I decided to take a look around the valley myself on an alt account just yesterday, and while parts of the base are reverting back to their grief state, much of it is still intact. The massive pyramid is still there, the unique additions survived, and even much of the farmland is still present. I'm not gonna lie, it felt nostalgic to walk around the Valley of Wheat and actually be surrounded by wheat. Seeing these sites made me acknowledge that I was wrong about the Valley of Wheat. The Russians had done what was thought to be impossible: rebuild it. And while it wasn't a complete restoration, it's the closest I've ever seen. Jang would be proud of these players putting aside their differences and coming together to honor the legacy of the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Also make sure to follow my socials, but that's it. Take it easy, Fit Fam, and stay alive out there.